The media may barely consider Gonzaga a top 25 team, but at least KenPom has our back.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Well, like Gonzaga players, Mazda sweats every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. Lots to cover today, folks. It is KenPom Day. For those who don't know, Ken Pomeroy, the runner of the great KenPom website, the premier college basketball analytics site, he likes to release his preseason rankings 1 through 363 unexpectedly. Doesn't tell you when, no countdown on the website, just one day, boom. The rankings are there. That happened on Sunday, so we are going through them today, talking about where Gonzaga landed, comparing the WCC and the new look Pac-12, which Gonzaga will, of course, join next season. Taking a look at Gonzaga's very, very strong non-conference schedule as well. And then we're closing out the show talking women's basketball FanFest, which took place on Saturday, what we saw from Lisa Fortier's new look team. Gonzaga came in at KenPom's rankings at number 8 overall, the highest of any of the media or computer, basically the humans and the computers. All of the rankings that we have seen, none of them were higher than KenPom at number 8. They are 8th behind Houston at number 1, Florida at number 2, followed by Purdue, Kentucky, UConn, Illinois, Duke, and then the Zags at number 8. Tennessee is at number 9, and UCLA rounds it out in the top 10. Notably, if you go on KenPom and you click on the team and if you click on the Gonzaga's page and you click on their roster, it does not show Tyon Grant-Foster. I am not sure. I've reached out, haven't heard back. If Gonzaga's ranking at number 8 is not taking into account Tyon Grant-Foster, or if it is and he's just not listed on the roster, because if you were to pull from Gonzaga's website, they do not have Tyon Grant-Foster on the website. Now, granted, Gonzaga's current website only has the returners, so it also does not have Adam Miller or Mario St-Superi or Davis Fogel or any of them, and they all showed up on KenPom's site. The only player missing was Grant-Foster. So I'm inclined to believe that Gonzaga's spot at number 8 in these rankings is without including the 2023-24 WAC Player of the Year, former 20-point per game scorer, and very strong defensive wing, Tyon Grant-Foster, which makes me think there's a possibility that this team, if even by the time you're listening to this or sometime this week, if Grant-Foster is in fact granted eligibility to play for Gonzaga this season, which as of right now, he only has that practice waiver and he is not cleared to play in games. If that does happen, and KenPom updates his rosters, it's possible Gonzaga could climb even more if Grant-Foster is not currently being factored in for Gonzaga this upcoming season. Either way, like we said at the onset, KenPom is higher on Gonzaga than pretty much everywhere else. In fact, I have not found any other media outlet or analytics model out there that has Gonzaga higher than 8th. I've only found one other one that even has Gonzaga in the top 10, and that is Evan Miyakawa. Gonzaga was originally 16th. They moved up to 12th after an adjustment to Jalen Warley's numbers. Now they are 10th. That is the only other place I have seen Gonzaga as a top 10 team. Bart Torvik, another popular analytics site, has Gonzaga down at 24th. Kind of surprising to see the computer models be very far off on this team at this point. In terms of the people rankings, John Rothstein has Gonzaga at number 18. ESPN and Jeff Borzello have Gonzaga at number 20, as does Sleepers Media. And then On 3, which was written by the Field of 68 writers, have Gonzaga at 24th. Those are just a handful of the top 25 that we have seen at this point. If you listen to today's episode of Locked On College Basketball, both myself and my co-host Isaac Shade released our top 25s. For what it's worth, I have Gonzaga 15th. He has Gonzaga 22nd. Still kind of waiting on that Grant-Foster status to kind of lock in where we think this team should be. It's one of the biggest kind of question marks around any of the potential top 25 teams in college basketball, and continues to be a source of frustration, of course, for Gonzaga, in the sense that it's hard to pin down how good this team can be without knowing if one of their most prized transfer portal additions is going to be able to suit up for this team this year or not. Looking more into Gonzaga's ranking here at number 8 by KenPom, the two stats that I cite most often on this show are adjusted offensive efficiency and adjusted defensive efficiency. I'll also cite tempo and a few other stats as well. The preseason tempo rankings are just not really worth getting into at this point. But I do want to cite the adjusted offensive and adjusted defensive efficiencies and kind of give an explanation on what they are, because I realize I cite them a lot throughout the season when we're doing those preseason or pregame kind of analysis, previews of those opponents, kind of what they mean. So Gonzaga's adjusted offensive efficiency is 120. That means it is a measure of points scored per 100 possessions. So if Gonzaga had 100 possessions, this model projects that they would score 120 points, and it is adjusted based on your opponent. So it might say you'd score 130 points against Portland and 105 points against UCLA, but it is adjusted based on your opponent. But overall, Gonzaga comes in at 120. That is 9th. They have the 9th best adjusted offensive efficiency in college basketball. Defensively, they come in at 94.6, which you can imagine that means that over 100 possessions on defense, they would give up about 94.5 points. That is 20th. So Gonzaga's in the top 20 in both adjusted offensive and adjusted defensive efficiency. For reference, only 7 teams total are in the top 20 in both. Gonzaga, you can probably guess the rest of the list because it's pretty much the teams that are ahead of them in KenPom standings. UConn, Florida, Houston, Kentucky, Duke, and Illinois are the other teams. Every team ahead of Gonzaga in the standings, with the exception of Purdue, is top 20 in both adjusted offensive and adjusted defensive efficiency. 3 of those teams, by the way, are top 10 in both. That would be Houston, Florida, and Kentucky. Another thing that's worth acknowledging when looking at this KenPom data is that Ken Pomeroy, I should say, the creator of KenPom, has recently started. He's always had coaching factored in, but he has adjusted the way that his coaches are factored in to kind of more emphasize the impact that a head coach makes. So he was able to share some data that shows the most impactful coaches in college basketball in terms of how much they impact your team's offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. Unsurprisingly, Mark Few is in the top 10 for most positively impactful head coaches, according to what the data says this team should do and what they actually do. He's able to take that data and say, well, this is, coaching has an impact here. So Mark Few was 8th on this list. Incidentally, not even first among coaches in the WCC, as St. Mary's coach Randy Bennett came in at number 3 on this list. The list is Kelvin Sampson at Houston, Grant McCaslin at Texas Tech, Bennett. Number 4 is Pat Kelsey at Louisville. Number 5 is Rick Pitino at St. John's. Danny Hurley at UConn is 6. Kyle Smith, another former WCC coach. He's currently at Stanford, and he comes in at number 7. Mark Few at 8. Chris Beard at Ole Miss at 9. And then this one surprised me a little bit. Steve Forbes over at Wake Forest, who hasn't yet to make the NCAA tournament while coaching the Demon Deacons, but he came in at number 10. A few others to shout out: Mark Pope on the list at number 18, and former Gonzaga assistant coach and current Boise State head coach Leon Rice, number 24. When I started to say that, I bet you thought I was going to say Tommy Lloyd, but Tommy Lloyd not on this list. Obviously only has a couple years of sample size, so we'll see if that changes in the next couple of years. Also worth pointing out, Gonzaga pretty continually either tops where they started out in the preseason for KenPom ranking, or at least matches where they ended up, to the point where they have been top 12 at KenPom every single year since 2016. They finished top 12 at KenPom every single year since 2016. That was the year that they barely made the tournament as an 11 seed, but still made that run to the Sweet 16 before losing to Syracuse. Gonzaga finished first at KenPom 3 times in the last decade, in 2017, in 2021, and again in 2022. They finished second in 2019 and again in 2020. They finished 8th last year in 2025 and again in 2023. They were 10th in 2018, and their worst of the last decade was 12th in the 2024 season. They have continually been a darling at KenPom, and for good reason. How is the WCC shaking up? This is Gonzaga's last year in the conference, and it doesn't look like it's going to be quite as competitive at the top as it has been in recent years. We're going to talk about that, plus this team's murderous non-conference slate, all coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, this episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, but about redefining it. There are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, and they keep moving the game forward. And this week's moment that moved the game forward is Ryan Nembhard making his NBA debut in the preseason for the Dallas Mavericks last week. He had 5 points, 2 assists, and 2 blocks in his first game, a win over Oklahoma City. He also had 4 points, 3 boards, and a pair of assists in 9 minutes against Charlotte on Saturday. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. So Mazda, move and be moved. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we are still talking about the updated KenPom rankings for the upcoming college basketball season. We talked about Gonzaga coming in at number 8, being a top 20 team in both adjusted offensive and adjusted defensive efficiency. Now we're going to talk a little bit about who Gonzaga is set to play this year and where they come in on these rankings. We'll start with the very, very challenging non-conference slate for Gonzaga. We have talked about this a handful of times already this season. It is not news that Gonzaga is playing a ridiculously tough non-conference schedule. But now with KenPom out, we can really put some numbers on it. 8 of the 12 Gonzaga's playing 13 non-conference games. We know 12 of the opponents because we do not know who they will play in the third and final game of the Players Era Festival. But of the 12 known opponents, 8 of them are in KenPom's top 75. 6 of them are in the top 50. Half of Gonzaga's non-conference games are against top 50 teams in all of college basketball. And again, 75% of their known opponents are in the top 75. We already talked about UCLA and Kentucky. Kentucky, is number 4 at KenPom. They're almost certainly going to be a top 5 team when the AP poll comes out. It might be coming out as you're listening to this on Monday, so we might have that data all ready to talk about on a future episode. But Kentucky's going to be great. Gonzaga's got them in Nashville. That's going to be a very tough game. UCLA is at number 10. UCLA continually showing up in the top 15 or so of preseason rankings as well. Very good team on paper. A lot of good returners for that team. Alabama comes in at number 23. LeBaron Philon coming back for that team. Houston Millett, former Pepperdine guard, is going to play a big role for them as well. They love to get out and run. They love to score in transition and from the three-point line. Should be a really fun test for the Zags in that first game in the Players Era Festival. That second game in the Players Era Festival will be against the Maryland Terrapins, who are 34th, one of the toughest teams to kind of pin down as they have a completely new look roster after their coach, Buzz Williams, who left Texas A&M, will now take over. He's a very, very good coach, but has a new look roster. So it'll be interesting to see how they look by the time November rolls around. Dana Altman and the Oregon Ducks come in at number 37, a little lower than most places have Oregon. Creighton, also a little lower than most places. Creighton tends to be kind of right at the back half of the top 25 by most people, but KenPom only has them 41st. I like this Creighton roster a lot. I think they have a ton of good continuity, but we will see they're relying on some players to step up into bigger roles. So we'll see if that happens for them. Oklahoma, Porter Moser and the Sooners, Gonzaga's first big game of the season, set for November 8th at the Spokane Arena. They come in at 58th in KenPom's rankings. And then Arizona State, who Gonzaga is playing in Tempe, their lone true road game of the non-conference slate. Arizona State just sneaks into the top 75 at number 75. And again, there will likely be another top 75 team. If Gonzaga goes 1-1, if they go 2-0 in the Players Era Festival, beat Bama and Maryland, they will certainly play a top 20 or a top 75, probably top 30 team in college basketball. If they go 1-1, I still think they end up playing a top 75 team. If they go 0-2, they might end up drawing one of the weaker teams in the field in that final game. It is based on your record in those first 2 games, but there's a good chance that Gonzaga will play another very good team in Vegas. The rest of Gonzaga's non-conference schedule, outside the top 200, they are the bye games. Campbell comes in at 203. Southern Utah comes in at 269. Texas Southern, who Gonzaga opens against on November 3rd, they are 300th. And then North Florida, the Ospreys, come in at 341. All right, let's take a look at the West Coast Conference. Continue to talk about the growth of this conference, the development, the success we have seen of some of the non-Gonzaga and St. Mary's programs. KenPom, however, not really reflecting that this year. There's a lot of teams bunched pretty close together, but not a lot of top-end talent. Only 3 teams in the WCC that are in the top 100. And in fact, Gonzaga is actually the only team in the conference in their final year of members of the WCC. They're the only team in the conference inside the top 50. That is because St. Mary's has dropped. They replaced 4 starters. I can understand why the computer models maybe don't love this St. Mary's roster, losing all of their starters except Paulus Morauskas. Yes, they are going to have Mikey Lewis step into a starter role, and he played starter caliber minutes last year for the Gales, but they come in at 55. So they're not far off from being a top 50 team, but they are also a team that historically outperforms their KenPom preseason rankings, often by a considerable amount. If you ask me over under on St. Mary's at 55 by the end of the year, I'm smashing that they're lower than that they're in the 30s, probably maybe 40s, but that would be a worst case scenario. I wouldn't be surprised if St. Mary's ends up finishing the season in the 20s. So I don't take their 55th for a team that has so many new faces. I don't think that that's a super big indictment on them necessarily, as I expect that'll climb as the year goes on. Next up, San Francisco, the Dons. They come in at 84th on this list. Again, the only other top 100 team. I think that's a little low on the Dons as well. I really like this roster. I like the additions they got coming in. Guillermo Diaz-Graham's going to be great. Mookie Cook should be a nice breakout candidate for them coming over from Oregon. They keep Tyrone Riley and Ryan Beasley, I think this is going to be a very fun and exciting team in the conference. I wouldn't be surprised to see them top 75 when it's all said and done. After that is where you get the teams bunched together. Santa Clara just misses the top 100 at 105. Seattle U, shout out the Redhawks, my other alma mater, top 5 projected finish in the WCC in their first year in the conference. They come in at 116, ahead of the two Pac-12 opponents that Gonzaga is going to join in the new look conference next year. Oregon State at 129, Washington State at 137, LMU 1 spot behind the Cougars at 138. Then there's a little gap where you get Pacific and San Diego. Those are notably the 2 teams that Gonzaga is only playing once this year. Pacific comes in at 168. San Diego, the Toreros, very new look roster for them. Some exciting transfer portal additions. We'll see if they can be better. They're projected 173rd, which is much higher than they have been the last couple of years, but still not exactly a great spot for that Toreros team. Finally, the last 2 teams, Pepperdine is 250th, and then Shantae Legans and the Portland Pilots, who had a pretty rough offseason, they come in at 268th. Now, comparing this to the Pac-12, it's not a surprise that the Pac-12 is deeper and has more talent concentrated at the top. And again, these things can change very dramatically year over year. These rankings will change a lot between now and the end of this season, and then there will be significant roster overhaul for many of these programs. But right now, if the Pac-12 were starting right now, you would feel much better with Gonzaga being in that new look Pac-12 than in the WCC, where there's only 3 top 100 teams. That is not the case for the new look Pac-12. The way that would shake out based on their rankings this year, Gonzaga still at the top, still number 1 at number 8 overall, followed by San Diego State, who is 30th. I have San Diego State ranked inside my top 25. I really like that roster. They return Magoon Guath, Miles Bird, and Reese Waters. I think that team's going to be very good. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they end up a pretty consistent top 25 ranked team. After that, you got Utah State, Boise State, and Colorado State. The rest, or almost the rest of the Mountain West defectors. Utah State is at 42. Leon Rice and Boise State's at 53. Colorado State with a new head coach, Ali Farouk Manesh, taking over for the Rams. They are at 79. Then you get the 2 stalwarts, the 2 long-term Pac-12 schools, Oregon State and Washington State, who again, 129 and 137. Then you get Texas State, the Bobcats, No, a program that not too many people for Gonzaga were super pumped about joining the conference, and for understandable reason. However, they are 176th, so not great, but still ahead of a few of the bottom feeders in the WCC, right around where San Diego and Pacific are projected to be. And then you have Fresno State at 190. Fresno State's a solid addition on the football side of things, but they are a mess in men's basketball, so not surprising to see them at the bottom of the projected standings for this upcoming season. Obviously, St. Mary's has been rumored swirling around that they are going to join the Pac-12. If they were to join, they would actually be fifth in this conference. Gonzaga, San Diego State, Utah State, Boise State, all slightly ahead of them. A few other schools that have been discussed. Memphis is 52. North Texas is 88. A couple of the Mountain West schools that didn't make it over the first time, but now are being discussed potentially with this ongoing litigation. Nevada at 92, New Mexico at 97, and then the most likely addition, if there were to be one, UNLV comes in at 107. A few others that stand out to me: Tulane at 114, Wichita State at 128, New Mexico State, who I don't think is a very likely addition, but were they to come in there at 144, and then UT San Antonio, who makes sense as a travel partner for Texas State, they're at 148. Rice, which would not be a great addition for basketball, they're at 167. And then the school that got a lot of press but was never a very realistic option, Sacramento State, now with Mike Bibby as the head coach and Shaquille O'Neal as the general manager, they come in at number 271. Well, folks, we're closing out the show talking FanFest. Lisa Fortier's new look roster debuted on Saturday. What did we see? What are we looking forward to? What was exciting about it? We're going to talk about all of that to close out the show coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets that you can use all across the app. One of the great things about FanDuel is that it fits however you like to bet, whether that's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just tracking your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. Zags remain at plus 3,500 to bring their first national championship to Spokane in their final season as members of the West Coast Conference. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. Folks, most people cannot even name all of their financial accounts or what they're worth, whether it's their 401k, their properties, or their investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface, either on your laptop or on your phone. And Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. My wife and I spent a lot of time making sure that our finances are up to date and in good shape, and Monarch makes it super simple for us to review our finances together. We can both see our budgets, our goals, and our spending activity in one place. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser, and you'll get half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com using code LOCKEDONCollege. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. And after talking about the updated KenPom rankings, what they mean for Gonzaga, what they mean for the WCC and the new look Pac-12, we're going to close out the show talking about FanFest. FanFest happened a week after Gonzaga's craziness in the kennel. It is the same event, just for the women's basketball team instead of the men's team. Took place on Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. Unfortunately, it was not streamed, so it was difficult to get a chance to really see how this event went down. There's some great reporting done on the event, some great articles written, some video clips posted by the Gonzaga Instagram and Twitter accounts. So be able to pull all of that together and kind of talk about what happened at this event, what it might mean for a very new look roster for Coach Lisa Fortier and the Zags. Again, same type of event. They had a hot shot event. They had a 3-point shootout. Then they had the scrimmage, a 4 quarters, 5 minutes per quarter scrimmage between the two teams. 3-point shootout was won by who you would expect it to be won by Allie Turner, one of the best three-point shooters in all of college basketball. Again, I'll reiterate this fact every opportunity that I get. There have been two players in women's college basketball over the last decade who, as freshmen, made over 100 threes with 40% better shooting. Allie Turner was one of them. The other one was Caitlin Clark at Iowa. Both of them obviously are lights out three-point shooters. Really excited to see what Turner can do in her sophomore year. Now, her team did not win in the scrimmage that took place. Team White beat Team Blue 32-27. Team White featured guard Inez Betancourt, who was here last year, as well as guard Zee Aokuso, who's a transfer from St. Mary's. Depth guard Cristobal Osorobo was on the team, as well as transfer Taylor Smith from Weber State, and Lauren Whitaker, who has been out for the last year, redshirting, but came over from New Zealand. That team also had freshman Jaden Hale and Boise State transfer guard Taryn Gardner. The blue team, Allie Turner was on that team, as well as freshman Julia Wilson, freshman Paige Loafing, and then transfer McKinley Dallin, who played last year after coming over from Minnesota, and then Cal Poly transfer Sierra Lichty, and Vera Gunadin, who was on the team in a small role last year. The highlights, the standouts, the players who performed well, I think the biggest, most notable was Zee Aokuso, the transfer from St. Mary's. We kind of expected that she was going to be somebody who's very likely, if not pretty much set in stone, to start alongside Allie Turner at one of the guard spots. It's really a question of whether Gonzaga is going to go with a 3-guard lineup, potentially start Turner, Betancourt, and Aokuso together, or if one of them is going to come off the bench. But Aokuso led all scorers in this game with 9 points. She had a pair of steals and an assist. She was a perfect 3 of 3 from the field, including making all 3 of her free throws as well. She had a fun quote in an article after the game as somebody who played at St. Mary's the last couple of years. She said, quote, "It feels better to be on the other side than to be playing against Gonzaga. Just the community, the culture, being around these girls, the coaching staff, especially the fans. I just love the environment." Yeah, it must be feel good, similar to Taylor Dalton last year, to be on the winning side of this matchup and get an opportunity to play with the Gonzaga on the front of your jersey as opposed to playing against them. And Aokuso looked very, very good in this game. Was a very good double-digit scorer as a freshman at St. Mary's. Was very good as a sophomore as well. Whitaker, who's kind of tasked the unenviable task of replacing Yvonne Ejim, a 5-year player, the most prolific scorer in Gonzaga basketball history. Whitaker looked good in this scrimmage as well. 8 points, 4 boards, a pair of steals. She was 4 of 9 from the field. And then Inez Betancourt, who is again competing with Aokuso for that second guard spot in the lineup. She had 7 points, 2 assists, 3 boards, shot 3 of 5 on 2-pointers, but she did miss all 3 of her 3-point attempts. She's about a 35% 3-point shooter last year. I think you'd love to see her improve on that and provide a little bit more spacing for this team, because it can't just be Allie Turner who's offering that floor spacing, especially if they want to play that inside-out game that they've done so well under Coach Fortier for the last decade. Taylor Smith, the Weber State transfer, 6'2" forward. She played very well in this game as well. 8 points on 4 of 5 shooting with 3 rebounds. Vera Gunadin, who again played very sparingly last year. I think she played like 2 to 3 minutes per game in like 18 games. She was basically only coming in garbage time. She played 10 minutes out of the 20 minutes in this scrimmage and had 6 points, made 2 3-pointers in this game. So wouldn't be surprised to see her stepping into a bigger role again after this team lost all of their starters from last year, except for Turner. They also lost Bree Salenbien and Claire O'Connor, who were both guard depth options for this team. So certainly going to be some room in that backcourt. And Vera is somebody who could step in, having now had a year of experience in this system under her belt. And then McKinley Dallin, again, from Washington, started her career at Minnesota, played very briefly in the Big Ten with the Golden Gophers, transferred to Gonzaga last year, was like the 7th or 8th player in the rotation last year, but is kind of expected to be a much bigger contributor for the team this year. May start in the front court or at least play big minutes off the bench at the 4 or the 5. She's a good floor spacing big as well, which I think is so valuable in this system. You saw Eliza Hollingsworth and Maud Hybens and many of the other bigs on this team be able to space the floor, and it helped especially helped Yvonne be able to operate down low when the other post players were out on the perimeter. Dallin had 5 points in this scrimmage, 3 rebounds. She was 2 of 3 from the field, including 1 of 1 from the 3-point line. She also participated in the 3-point shootout. Didn't win, again, going up against Allie Turner, but the fact that one of their post players was out there bombing threes in this in the 3-point shootout is a pretty good sign that Coach Fortier and the staff are looking to her to be able to space the floor in games this upcoming season. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Also give a special shout out to those everyday listeners as well. We'll be back. We got more player preview episodes coming your way this week. We're going to talk about the All-American candidate in the front court here on an upcoming episode, as well as Gonzaga's new point guard later this week. And we're finally going to get to ranking the best Zags from the state of Washington. Highly anticipated episode coming your way this week as well. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.